Threw in a couple teasers here at the beginning, in case you missed the thumbnail and have no idea what a ship looks like. Just kidding. Back to fumbling around with photo etch on a ship with this heavily modified version of Trumpeter's Pyotr Velikiy kit. What's up YouTube? Scale Model Assassin back again with a multi-month ship build. It's also my first attempt at a water base, which is constructed out of foam and aluminum foil. I've interspersed some segments into this video to show you how I did it. The kit I started with needed quite a bit of help, and by that I mean sanding and puttying in areas and seams that didn't quite line up like they should on just about every single part. Add in the aftermarket photo etch, and that didn't help matters, at least in terms of the stock parts fitting together with no issues. There are a decent amount of details molded into the plastic, but the photo etch takes it to the next level, and so I must remove the plastic detailing with a hobby knife and then sand everything smooth. Not every piece needs a photo etch bender. Some of the structures are scored and you can bend them along those lines just using a pair of tweezers. However, there are certain parts that were harder to finger bend and where a bending tool needed to be used. My advice? If you're serious about photo etch pieces, invest in a bending tool. It should last a very, very long time, and that helps justify their somewhat high prices. This particular structure is 100% photo etch and completely replaces a plastic part. I've taped the multiple photo etch parts together and glued them from the inside. No need to worry about removing the tape because you'll never see it in the end. I also used a little bit of Vallejo's acrylic putty after the fact to tidy up some of these connection points. This section of the ship was just a joy to build. And yes, you are sensing sarcasm. The plastic parts were a terrible fit and needed multiple applications of putty and sanding, plus a little plastic sheeting up top to smooth out the surface. My only complaint with the photo etch is that it was hard. And if doing it once was tough enough, each side is symmetrical, so you get to do everything twice. Oh well, if I wanted easy, I wouldn't have bought this stuff in the first place. Be liberal with your glue application. That's my best advice. I assembled the support bracing for the radar before I attach it to the dish. That helps prevent the glue from filling up the gaps on the dish, which then become ugly and visible when you paint it. I use that same approach for platforms that have perforations and support arms underneath them. Also, CA glue is flammable, so if you haven't already attached it to the plastic, if you make a mistake, you can use a lighter to burn off the glue, separate the parts, and try again. Sometimes when you see me with photo etch, some of the parts are blackish. Those have been burned. I begin my foray into oceanscaping with a piece of foam from the hardware store. This stuff is used for attics for insulation. Trace out the hull of the ship and cut it out as best you can. I used the scraps I removed to glue to the surface to make the ocean swells. I covered this with several layers of aluminum foil. It's best if your top layer is a single sheet with no seams. Otherwise, you'll have to figure out a way to hide the break. I glued the layers with PVA glue and test fit the ship. Finally, I smeared PVA glue over the whole top layer. This helps smooth out some of the aluminum ripples, and I primed this with gray Mr. Surfacer 1000, then sprayed Tamiya white intermittently over it, mainly focusing on the swells since they will be a lighter blue than the sea, for which I used Tamiya Sea Blue. It's got a good greenish blue tone to it, which might not be great for a Caribbean sea or close to shore, but picture this as well offshore in the Black, Baltic, or Barents Sea, anywhere you might see the Russian Navy operating. This is a multi-layer effect, so I'm spraying gloss clear, blue, and clear blue in addition to using sea blue. Thin sections of white can simulate the ship's wake. I used acrylic gel to add a bit more texture, and although it goes on white, it dries clear, so you'll need to paint it, or at least dry brush it. You can glob it on or chop it up with your brush depending on how rough the sea should look. It's water-based and can be wiped up with a damp cloth before it dries. I'm not done with the ocean yet, but back to the ship. I probably could have used a thin layer of Tamiya Hull Red for this deck, but I went the hard route and mixed my own shade. I then began the nightmare of masking the deck so I could spray the sides gray. This took as long as you think it did. Forever. Yes, there was overspray where I didn't get the mask perfect, and a lot of back and forth between fixing one problem and creating another between the red deck and the gray siding. Could I have bought a sheet of masks for this deck? Absolutely, and I did. And they were all off by a couple millimeters in every direction, so that's why I went piece by piece. I lost track of what grays I used, but it's generally Tamiya's dark gray and also sky gray. You can thin it a lot or a little and layer them over each other. That's how you get variation versus a monotone ship. I mostly use vertical passes with the airbrush since gravity pulls the rainwater and the seawater downward and weathers the ship accordingly. These mooring posts were the second smallest parts I painted on this model. The red and white striped life rings at the end of the video were the winner. When I attempted a mask for the helicopter pad, I taped over the decal and tried to slice around the border. That ruined the film holding the decal ink together. Here's the result. I turned a single decal into 7 pieces, which broke apart further. An annoyance, but after an hour of extra work, I got them all attached and straightened. The model has been coated with all-clad aqua gloss prior to this oil wash. A few minutes after application, it's dry enough for me to start blotting it away with mineral spirits, as well as helping to guide the oils into the crevices and raised details. I've saved the radar domes, guns, and deck details until the end of the build, contrary to the instructions. The 3D resin guns came as either 1 or 2 pieces, and the hardest part was detaching them from the plastic frame without breaking off all the details. The life raft holders are photo etch, while the life raft cases are resin. I lightly dip the holders into thick CA glue and then dab off any excess before I place it on the ship. The 3D printed set came with 2 choppers, and I needed both because I kept breaking off pieces when I tried to cut them from the 3D printed frame. You're seeing a mix of both choppers, plus some of the FSTAR photo etch for the blades. I lightly rolled the blades over a curved surface to give them a slight bend and simulate the sag that you see that's typical of this type of helicopter. Once you've added all the photo etch to the ship, it's hard to look at the kit provided plastic molded guns and use them. You'll be wanting something with more detail. Okay, back to my water base. All my acrylic gloss has dried clear, and now I need to paint the white foam. The base is clear coated with Mr. Hobby GX100 Gloss Clear, and I'm using the water-based AK 3rd Gen Acrylics White. This way, I can use water to either blend the feathered spots together for a translucent foam, or just completely wipe them away and start over if I don't like what I see. I used both techniques along the entirety of the ship, following the waves and swells created with the pieces of foam I placed earlier. With the rigging, I find it easier to attach at the bottom first and then pull up to the upper beam and attach it there second. Once dry, I'll stretch it a bit and snip off the excess. However, in situations where the rigging attaches to a railing, I'll do the reverse, loop it through the railing, and cut it off at the bottom. I don't have a singular method for attaching the rigging. It varies based on what I have to work with on the ship that I'm building. The gloss gel glues the ship to the base, and I can remove and smooth out the excess with water. Removing the excess is critical, or else you may end up with clear glossy ridges along the hull once it dries. Where the clear gloss meets the hull, I needle in some white foam with a very fine paintbrush. Don't go the full length, but blend it into the areas that you've already feathered with white paint on the base of the ocean. I saved the radar assembly on top until the very end, for obvious reasons. I've been guarding it off to the side for most of the build and being ultra protective not to break it, and I'm pleased to announce that it never broke. With that, I'm finished. All of a sudden, I had free time in my life again. This build took quite a few months, with every part needing to be created out of photo etch or needing to have some imperfection or gap filled and sanded on the plastic. Masking and painting the red deck took quite a while. Yes, there was overspray with both the red and the gray colors, so there was a lot of touch-up work, and then more mistakes and having to touch up my touch-ups. It's a never-ending cycle. Looks cool though, and is a nice departure from the typical brown deck. Anyways, that's all I've got. See you on the next build.